had times when I'd come home and from school, and there'd be a note there from my mother. I've gone down to the river to get your fish for tea. and said nearly always get one too, because the river was like that one of them days. You could go down and be pretty sure to get a fish. We did a lot of fishing. The family was quite. My father was a very keen fisherman and all that, and used to go down to the river and throw a line in and fish away. And afternoon the sea breeze would come up, or the east wind would come up, and Dad would say, "May I go home now?" He said, "They won't bite now, and the fish won't bite now." And he'd go off, and I'd be the optimist to sit there for another hour or so, trying to prove him wrong, but I never did.
Mum used to tell me about when she used to get home from school, there'd always be something yummy to eat after school, and a note left there, "Gone fishing, I'll be at such and such a hole if you need me."
I used to go fishing down the Molonglo River. I used to catch just down here little turtles and sell them to the pet shop in Kingston for 20 cents each, or two shillings each in those days. You know, if you can imagine, it was beautifully clear water, and you could see the trout in there, and yeah, we used to catch a lot of trout actually, and my father used to trap trout with a net as well when he was on in his earlier days.
My son can tell you about being at what was
Creek.
Sullivan's Creek. We used to go yabbying there. I used to take the children to collect yabbies and that.
My brothers used to go down to the Molonglo River. Well, actually it was Sullivan's Creek more than the river, because Sullivan's Creek flowed through our property, and they used to go down there and play. You know, there were a lot of trees falling down, so you could climb trees and paddle around in the creek and what have you. I went down there sometimes with them. We'd go yabbying. Sullivan's Creek was never really, we never knew it to be dry. And Sullivan's Creek joined the Molonglo River in the back corner of our property.
My dad and I would go yabbying down on the river near Lennox Crossing. And that was when it was the river, really under Lennox Crossing. And we'd go down there with the strings and little bits of bait of some description, and a big tin and a little scoop, and you'd throw the little strings out with the meat on the end, and you just sit there by the bank waiting for the little bits of string to start pulling, and then you pull it in and get the yabbies and put them in the tin. And then you build the little bonfire. You could do things like that in those days, and build a little bonfire, not a small fire, and put the tin with water in and cook them up. So we used to have very, very fresh yabbies to eat. And that supplemented our menu from the hotel, because fresh meat wasn't something you got in those days. You know, it was sort of pressed meat and tongue and horrible things like that. So fresh yabbies were a real treat.
When you look out of the window, there was rabbits, there was platypus. You could see them playing in the Molonglo River.
We saw lots of beautiful platypuses down the Molonglo River, and river rats and snakes. And so we become very fond of the river and the willow trees. They used to have a little rowing boat where they could just drift up through the willow trees and all that sort of thing.
My brother and I used to attempt, and we did catch water rats, and catch them, kill them, skin them. The skin was beautiful, or just beautiful, water rats.
I think we were warned not to swim in the Molonglo because of snags, and I think water rats were said to be a bit of a problem. I couldn't imagine why a water rat would have been a problem. One of my favourite books was Wind in the Willows, and old Ratty, he used to be a beaut character, and the Molonglo was a popular place to have it, and there were certain sort of swimming holes there that you used, snag free and water rat free.
You walked on the flat, you kept walking on the flat, and you came to the river, And this was the Molonglo, which was super river, very nice exploring for young men and their friends. That's where Richard Tabor came down, and we used to put boats in and play all sorts of games in the Molonglo as it wounded up round the hospital up on the hill. And that was fun.
We used to have little canoes, and when the water was up, we used to put those in and paddle around. You know, they're just homemade, and after about an hour they sunk, and we used to drag them back. Just made of corrugated iron, and you bend each end up and join them, and then in the middle you put a stick, so it forms a boat, and you get a bit of tar and pour down the ends so the water doesn't pour in, and you get a paddle of some description, and away you go. I can't remember hiding them, but we used to put them in an area where other people didn't find them. Yeah, probably hiding is a word, yeah. But we didn't. I can't remember especially going out of our way, but we just put them aside so people didn't see them, especially our parents, yeah. Oh, well, they wouldn't have thought a good idea, paddling in a flooded river on a bit of corrugated iron. But
the older kids of Acton cottages, the Dunshays and the McTaggarts, a bit older than me, and the Wallaces, they used to make canoes out of galvanised iron. You'd take a sheet of galvanised iron and you'd fold it lengthwise and fix 2 pieces of timber in fore and aft, and then pitch it up with bitumen so it wouldn't leak, and that would form a canoe. And then they'd launch it into the old swimming hole and paddle around in there. And of course, instead of carrying it home, they'd sink it down in the canoe and in the river and hide it under some bracken or whatever. So yeah, that was one of the memories of the old swimming hole.
The Molonglo River used to come from, I'll start at the bridge. It'd come down, and then there was a big island in the middle, a sand island, and the river would go either side, coming and joining up at the end of it to a big area, we call it the big pool. People did swim there. There were a couple of drownings in my time.
Yeah, another thing, it was a major swimming hole which was supposedly bottomless, but one of the Leach boys of number 1 Westlake, number 20, sorry, top of the hill, dived in, hit his head on something and died. It's one of the, yeah, and his friends helped him out. I never swam there, but I actually have in documents here, it was a major pool, and the girls from Gorman House and Beecham House, which is now the, Ian Potter House, and anyone from Hotel Acton, they actually applied for having dressing sheds put there and having it cleaned up.
There was a hole where the river turned, where the hospital was. There was a very deep hole there, and the nurses used to nip down when no one was looking and jump in and have a swim. So I never swam there, didn't like the idea. And that is now the deepest part of the lake.
In the summer, it was wonderful because it did get very hot. We had no air conditioning in the hospital or the nurses' home. But we would don our 2-piece swimmers and take a towel and go down and sunbake on the banks of the Molonglo River. And then other boys found out that some of us nurses went down there and were doing this, and some would remove their tops. So some did have a bit of a reputation. But it was always very pleasant down there.
There was a tourist cottage, a series of tourist cottages, cubicles, on the banks above the old swimming hole. I don't know who run them, I suppose a government organisation of some sort. And they were quite popular with tourists, from the cottages or from the cubicles down to the swimming hole. And that was the other part of it.
Now, if you asked anyone, virtually anyone, where the first tourist camp in Canberra was, they wouldn't have a clue. It's down near the river. Beautiful spot, some little cottages, you know, for camping. It was very good.
This was an extract from some notes that Gordon Kay, after whom I'm named obviously, he recorded them years ago, and they're fascinating reading. He said there was a beautiful camping ground at the bottom, down below where Dr. Lane's residence at the hospital later stood, and still stands actually. There was a town swimming pool with a diving board and things there, beautiful poplar and willow trees, and an old caretaker there, Jim O'Brien. And I met quite a few well-known figures there. One was Elioth Gruner, the painter. He was a very nice fellow. He used to give me cups of coffee and this sort of thing. Another was a very different type of wild, mad wretch who wrote a book called Hells, Bells and Mademoiselles. His name was Joe Maxwell. Another one I met there was a nice lady called Mrs. Kelly, but her artistic name was May Gibbs, and she used to do the well-known strip in the Sunday Sun every week called Bib and Bub. She said to me one day, "Watch next Sunday and you will see these tables and willow trees in Bib and Bub," and sure enough they were there. So it was obviously a very popular area, you know, for people who with an artistic bent.
Well, there's one police story about the Molonglo River which goes down into the old policing law, and this was in the earlier days of Canberra. And as you know, of course, the Molonglo flows through New South Wales, through Queanbeyan, and at one stage there was spotted in the Molonglo River a badly decomposed body. And anyway, the Queanbeyan police reported it to the ACT police that this body was in their territory. And the ACT police went down there and couldn't find it very readily because of a lot of bush alongside there. And anyway, the next day, the ACT police reported they had searched their area where it was supposed to be and couldn't find the body. And Queanbeyan police went there and found the body had in fact floated back upstream. It was in their area. And the story goes that this body kept on changing jurisdictions for the next couple of days until eventually, I'm not sure which side, whether it was the ACT police or the Queanbeyan police, decided that somebody had better do something about it. But it was quite well renowned as the body that sort of floated back and forward between the ACT and New South Wales for quite some time before it was eventually dealt with.